Upon seeing a video of Jessica with her dog, Paula immediately called the police. Paula and Jessica had been married for nearly a year, and their life together had been peaceful, simple, yet fulfilling. Their cozy home was always filled with warmth, laughter, and the gentle presence of Toby, their Siberian husky. He was more than just a pet. He was family, but lately something had changed. At first, it was subtle. Jessica, once affectionate and lively, grew distant. She spoke less, her laughter became rare, and her gaze often seemed vacant, as if she were lost in a world only she could see. She would sit for hours, her fingers absent-mindedly running through Toby's thick fur, whispering softly to him. It was as if Paula had ceased to exist in her world. Paula tried to reason with himself it was just stress, maybe work-related. But soon, the change became undeniable. Jessica refused to leave Toby's side. She wouldn't even sleep unless he was curled up next to her. When Paula tried to bring it up, she would dismiss his concerns with a forced smile and change the subject. The most unsettling part, Toby seemed different too. His eyes, usually bright and full of mischief, now held an eerie intensity, almost as if he understood more than a dog should. Doubt turned into unease, and unease turned into fear. Was he imagining things, or was there something truly sinister happening? Paula needed answers. One evening, after Jessica had gone to bed, he carefully installed a hidden camera in the living room. Ensuring it had a clear view of both Jessica and Toby, he set it to record while he was away at work, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was pulling his wife further and further away from him. The next day, with his heart pounding in his chest, he sat down to review the footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. At first, it was just Jessica sitting on the floor, staring into Toby's eyes, whispering in hushed tones. But then, something changed. Toby's body stiffened, and his head tilted unnaturally. His blue eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Jessica's lips moved faster, as if she was in a trance. And then, in a voice that was not her own, she began to respond. Paula's hands trembled as he paused the video. His mind screamed for a rational explanation, but deep down, he knew this was beyond reason. Toby wasn't just a dog, and whatever had taken hold of Jessica was no longer human. His breath came in short gasps. He grabbed his phone and dialed the police, his fingers slick with sweat. Because in that moment, Paula knew he wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing her to something else. And it had been waiting for him to find out. Paula's hands trembled as he watched the footage over and over again, hoping, praying that he had imagined it. But the more he watched, the more the horror set in. Jessica wasn't just talking to Toby, she was conversing with him. And the voice that came out of her was deep, guttural, and completely unnatural. A sudden, sharp knock on the front door jolted him back to reality. His heart pounded violently in his chest. The police. He had called them in a panic, but now, as he stood frozen, a new fear crept in. What was he going to tell them? That his wife was speaking to their dog in a voice that wasn't hers? That something unexplainable was happening inside his home? He forced himself to move, stepping cautiously toward the door. When he opened it, two officers stood on the porch, their expressions neutral but alert. "Mr. Paula, you reported an emergency. What seems to be the problem?" Paula hesitated. He glanced over his shoulder at the dimly lit living room, where Jessica now sat motionless on the couch, staring blankly at the television. Toby was curled up at her feet, his icy blue eyes fixed on Paula as if he knew what was happening. "My wife, something's wrong with her," he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. One of the officers, a tall man with sharp features, exchanged a glance with his partner. "Is she a danger to herself or others?" Paula swallowed hard. "I don't know, maybe?" He wanted to say so much, to show them the footage, to make them see what he had seen. But even as the words formed in his mind, a whisper soft, cold brushed against his ears. "Paula, don't." He turned sharply. Jessica was still on the couch, her lips unmoving, her eyes vacant. But Toby, Toby was staring at him. Paula's breath hitched. That voice, it had come from nowhere, or had it? The officers were still waiting for an answer, but Paula's skin crawled with a feeling he couldn't shake. He was being watched. Not just by Jessica, not just by Toby, but by something else, something unseen. "Sir," one of the officers asked again, shifting impatiently. Paula forced himself to speak. I might have overreacted, it's just. She hasn't been acting like herself." The officers exchanged a glance. "If you need any help, or if she becomes a danger, call us back," one of them said. Paula nodded, closing the door as they left. He turned to look at Jessica again, his pulse racing. She was smiling now, a slow, knowing smile. "You shouldn't have done that, Paula." His blood ran cold. The voice, it was hers this time. But there was something else behind it. A presence, a weight, and then Toby stood up. He stretched lazily, his tail swaying as he hopped off the couch. But his movements weren't natural. They were too fluid, too calculated. He padded toward Paula, head low, eyes gleaming with something ancient. Paula took an instinctive step back. "Jessica, what's going on?" She tilted her head, her fingers stroking the couch absent-mindedly. "Oh, Paula," she cooed, her voice dripping with something sinister. "You always were the curious one." Toby let out a low, guttural growl, not of warning, but of amusement. And now, she continued, standing up and stepping toward him. "You finally see." The lights flickered. The air grew heavy, and as Paula stood trapped between his wife and the creature that used to be his dog, he realized too late, this wasn't his home anymore. It never had been, and now, it never would be again. Paula's breath came in shallow gasps. His mind screamed at him to move, to run, to do something, but his body wouldn't obey. Jessica took another slow step forward, her movements eerily graceful, her once warm brown eyes now dark voids that pulled at him. Toby was beside her, his husky fur seeming darker, almost shadow-like, as though the light itself recoiled from him. "You're afraid, aren't you?" Jessica's voice was playful, teasing. "You should be." Paula's hands balled into fists. "Jessica, please, if this is some kind of sick joke." Her laugh was soft, but wrong, like it didn't belong to her anymore. "A joke." She glanced at Toby, who let out a deep, guttural sound that almost sounded like a chuckle. Paula's skin prickled. His wife and his dog were communicating. No, not Jessica, not Toby. Something else was inside them. His eyes darted to the front door. It was only a few feet away. Could he make it? Could he outrun them? "You won't get far," Jessica murmured, as if reading his thoughts. Then, with a snap of her fingers, the door slammed shut. Paula's stomach twisted. He spun back toward her. "What the hell are you?" Jessica smirked, tilting her head. "Not what?" Paula, who, the air around them thickened. A deep hum vibrated through the walls, through the floor, through him. He could feel something unseen wrapping around his chest, pushing against his lungs. Then, suddenly, the lights died, complete darkness. Paula's pulse pounded in his ears. He reached blindly for the nearest object to lamp, a chair. Anything but before he could take a step. A whisper slithered through the blackness. "Paula," the hairs on his neck stood on end. It wasn't Jessica's voice, it wasn't Toby's either. This voice was ancient, hollow, echoing with 1,000 others beneath it. Then, cold breath brushed against his ear. "You invited me in." Everything inside Paula shattered. A memory surfaced, one he had long forgotten. 6 months ago, a cold, rainy night. Jessica had brought Toby home from a small, back alley breeder. The man had seemed strange, his eyes sunken, his smile too wide. "He's a special breed," the man had said, his voice raspy. "Very loyal, he'll bond to you completely." Jessica had laughed, delighted. "Then we'll take him." Paula remembered how the man's expression had changed just slightly, like he knew something they didn't. "Once you take him in," the man had murmured, "he's yours forever." At the time, it had meant nothing, but now he knew the truth. They hadn't adopted a dog, they had welcomed something else. Something that had been waiting, the lights flickered back on, and Paula stumbled backward, his heart slamming against his ribs. Jessica stood inches from him, her face unchanged, but her eyes were someone else's now. Toby sat beside her, his mouth parting slightly, almost as if he were grinning. "It's too late, my love," Jessica whispered, reaching out. And when her fingers brushed his skin, Paula finally saw. A flood of memories that weren't his, centuries of them crashed into his mind. The husky wasn't a husky, Jessica wasn't Jessica. They had never been alone, and now neither was he.